کنفرانس جهانی همزمان با اعلام حکم دادگاه. ارتباط زنده آنلاین با مجاهدین در اشرف 3، دادگاه آنتورپ، شخصیتهای بین المللی و شاکیان خصوصی و یاران شورشگر. 3000 نقطه در 40 کشور جهان.
قسمت هشتم. سخنرانیهای رابرت جوزف، معاون وزیر خارجه آمریکا 2005-2007. استفانیا پتزوپانه، نماینده پارلمان ایتالیا. جیم هیگینز، رئیس پیشین هیئت نمایندگی ایرلند در پارلمان اروپا. استرون استیونسون، رئیس کارزار تغییر برای ایران.
رابرت جوزف، معاون وزیر خارجه آمریکا 2005-2007. معنی حکم دادگاه بلژیک برای اتحادیه اروپا اتخاذ یک سیاست قاطع است، از جمله نامگذاری وزارت اطلاعات و سپاه پاسداران به عنوان موجودیت‌های تروریستی، سلب موقعیت قانونی تمام ماموران رژیم در اروپا و کاهش سطح روابط دیپلماتیک.
استفانیا پتزوپانه، نماینده پارلمان ایتالیا. محکومیت دادگاه آنتورپ نوک کوه یخ رژیمی است که تروریسم بخش مکمل سیاست خارجی آن میباشد. این محکومیت میبایست اخطاری جدی برای دولت‌های اروپایی به منظور تصحیح سیاست مماشاتگرانشان در قبال یک رژیم دیکتاتوری و خطرناک باشد.
جیم هیگینز، رئیس پیشین هیئت نمایندگی ایرلند در پارلمان اروپا. این دادگاه خط بطلانی می‌کشد بر ادعاهای دروغینی که بین باندهای رژیم تفاوت وجود دارد. به راستی بین امثال ظریف و روحانی و قاتلین رسوایی مثل قاسم سلیمانی چه تفاوتی وجود دارد؟ هیچ.
استرون استیونسون، رئیس کارزار تغییر برای ایران. حکم دادگاه بلژیک باید نقطه عطفی در رابطه با رژیم آخوندها باشد. هیچ بازگشتی به روابط عادی گذشته نباید باشد. دیگر هیچ بحثی در این باره نباید باشد که گویا دیپلماسی پاسخگوست.
کنفرانس جهانی همزمان با اعلام حکم دادگاه. ارتباط زنده آنلاین با مجاهدین در اشرف 3، دادگاه آنتورپ، شخصیتهای بین المللی و شاکیان خصوصی و یاران شورشگر. 3000 نقطه در 40 کشور جهان.
قسمت هشتم. سخنرانیهای رابرت جوزف، معاون وزیر خارجه آمریکا 2005-2007. استفانیا پتزوپانه، نماینده پارلمان ایتالیا. جیم هیگینز، رئیس پیشین هیئت نمایندگی ایرلند در پارلمان اروپا. استرون استیونسون، رئیس کارزار تغییر برای ایران.
Good day. Iran's terrorist diplomat, اسدالله Asadi, and his 3 accomplices have been found guilty of the attempted bombing of the Free Iran gathering near Paris in 2018, a gathering of tens of thousands of men, women, and children who came together to celebrate their vision of a free and secular Iran. This conviction should stand as an object lesson for all governments conducting relations with the regime. Following the arrest of these individuals on the day of the planned bombing, the Belgian State Security Agency, working closely with authorities in France, Germany, Austria, and elsewhere, conducted an in-depth 2-year investigation of the attack, an attack that would have resulted in catastrophic loss of life, likely hundreds killed, and many, many more wounded and permanently disabled. If it had not been stopped, the terrorist attack that day could have been the deadliest in Europe's history. I attended the 2018 meeting along with hundreds of parliamentarians, human rights activists, and other guests from around the world. Clearly, the main target was Mrs. Rajavi, head of the National Council of Resistance of Iran and the host of the rally. As I was seated close to Mrs. Rajavi, I could well have been one of the casualties. For this reason, and for others, I became a party to the court and have followed the proceedings closely. At the trial, the prosecutor presented a mountain of evidence to support the charges against the defendants, including attempted terrorism with the intent to kill and activities within a terrorist entity. The principal findings revealed by the prosecution were, first, this was a deliberate act of state terrorism ordered by and conducted by the Iranian regime. Asadi, the principal defendant, was found to be a senior official of the Ministry of Intelligence and Security, the MOIS, assigned to the Iranian embassy in Vienna and masquerading as a diplomat. Second, Asadi was not acting alone. He was not a rogue agent. He was in regular contact with higher level officials in Tehran, receiving his orders directly from them. He took personal possession of the bomb, which was transported on a commercial airline from Iran and was designed by professionals to cause maximum damage. Third, Asadi, using his diplomatic status as a cover for his criminal activities, had been running a network of agents in Europe from his position in the embassy. There can be no doubt that the true identity of this terrorist diplomat was known within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, making the MFA complicit in this act of terror. This is the first time that an Iranian regime official has been caught red-handed in and convicted of a state-sponsored act of terrorism. This brazen act reflects the desperation of a regime that has lost all legitimacy with the people of Iran. Through pervasive corruption, through foreign aggression in support of dictators such as Assad in Syria, and through the bankrolling of terrorist groups, the religious dictatorship has squandered the wealth of the Iranian nation. Through its brutal repression of those seeking a democratic Iran, including the mass murders of more than 100,000 of its own citizens from the 1980s until the present, and through now its proven direct acts of terrorism in Europe and around the globe, the regime has committed crimes against humanity for which those responsible must be held accountable. Targeting a massive crowd to pursue the criminal objective of killing the leader of the democratic opposition is an abhorrent crime that cannot be tolerated by any civilized government. Now that the verdict has been handed down by the court, the judiciary has finished its work. It's now time for the governments to act decisively, knowing that further concessions to the regime will only bring more injustice to the Iranian people and more criminal and terrorist acts. For the EU, this should mean the adoption of a firm policy, including designating the MOIS and the IRGC as terrorist entities, withdrawing the legal status of all of the regime's agents in Europe, and reducing the level of diplomatic relations until the regime has demonstrated its commitment to forgo terrorist activities. For the Biden administration, the guilty verdicts of Asadi and his accomplices should weigh heavily in its review of Iran policy. This act of state terrorism should have a sobering effect. It should end any move to resurrect the appeasement policies of the past and dispel any false nostalgia about working with Minister Zarif as a moderate influence in the regime, as he, with no doubt, was aware of the attempted attack by MOIS operatives working under his auspices. The new administration must uphold the values that it espouses. If the leaders of free societies fail to hold the perpetrators responsible, including at the highest levels in Tehran, it will only encourage more terrorist attacks and make us complicit in them. Thank you very much.
Con la condanna del diplomatico iraniano Asdì e di 3 dei suoi complici emessa dal Tribunale di Anversa e da ciò che è trapolato dai fascicoli, si evince che nel 2018 è stato sventato un terribile attentato al raduno della resistenza iraniana a Villepin. Nell'automobile di Asdì, importante diplomatico iraniano, membro dei servizi dell'intelligence, arrestato dall'antiterrorismo tedesco il 1 luglio 2018, si sono trovati molti documenti che non lasciano spazi e dubbi sull'attentato sventato a Villepinte, ma svelano anche una rete capillare del terrorismo in tutta Europa. Gli agenti tedeschi hanno trovato un quaderno nero, zeppo di scritte in codice, probabilmente istruzioni di esplosivo, e un block notes verde in cui sono riportate 289 note sui luoghi degli incontri, indirizzi di ristoranti, centri commerciali, alberghi e nel dettaglio note delle somme pagate a persone, con tanto di date. Dal libretto verde di Asdì è trapelato che si recava in vari paesi europei, anche in Italia, per incontrarsi con gli esponenti della sua rete e per fornire loro denaro e informazioni. L'obiettivo principale del terribile attentato era la signora Mariam Rajavi, presidente eletta del Consiglio nazionale della resistenza iraniana, e centinaia tra importanti personalità politiche provenienti da ogni parte del mondo. Infatti le personalità presenti nel raduno di Villepinte si sono costituite parte civile nel processo contro Asdì. In particolare Mariam Rajavi ha reso una testimonianza preziosa di 8 ore in cui ha descritto la piramide complessa del sistema terroristico della teocrazia al potere in Iran. La condanna del Tribunale di Anversa ha evidenziato la punta dell'iceberg di un regime che fa del terrorismo parte integrante della sua politica estera. Questa condanna deve essere un serio monito per le cancellerie europee al fine di correggere la loro politica nei riguardi di un regime dittatoriale e pericoloso. Le proteste degli iraniani all'interno del paese, l'aumento spaventoso di esecuzioni mostrano che la società iraniana è sul punto di esplodere e il regime non ha altra soluzione che la feroce repressione. Perciò io credo che sia giunta l'ora che la comunità internazionale, soprattutto i governi europei, il governo italiano esso stesso, si mettano tutti decisamente dalla parte del popolo iraniano che lotta per la democrazia. Il passo concreto di questa saggia politica è riconoscere formalmente il Consiglio nazionale della resistenza iraniana guidata da Mariam Rajavi e anche le relazioni con l'Iran siano condizionate dalla garanzia che venga posta fine alle azioni terroristiche in Europa al rispetto dei diritti umani. Grazie.
Today, as everyone calls it, is truly a historic day, a significant victory that I would like to congratulate the people of Iran and their legitimate resistance, the NCRI and Mrs. Rajavi. We know that this is not the first time that the regime has carried out such terrorist operations. They've done it over 4 decades, and their track record in this regard is truly horrendous. But the significance of this case is that it is the first time that a diplomat has been caught in the act of such a heinous terrorist crime. The amount of evidence against this so-called diplomat, Asdallah Assadi, is just astonishing. It is overwhelming. Investigations by the French and Belgian intelligence services, they reveal that he was not the main decision maker in this terrorist operation against the large gathering of NCRI. Rather, it was sanctioned by the Supreme National Security Council of Iran, chaired by President Rouhani, and approved by Supreme Leader Khamenei, and then assigned to the Ministry of Intelligence in close cooperation with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. What more evidence could you want? This court refutes the false claim that the lobbies and defenders of the regime have been trying to push for years and to feed to the world. And that is that there is a difference between the gangs within the regime, that is between the fundamentalists and the so-called reformists and moderates. What is really the difference between the likes of Foreign Minister Zarif and President Rouhani, who are involved in such terrorist operations that could have killed hundreds and maybe thousands of people, and the infamous murders of Qasem Soleimani? Nothing. They are only the two sides of the same coin. Indeed, Zarif himself publicly admitted that he would adopt foreign policy in regular meetings with Soleimani and his consultation. This regime's machine of terror and deception has to be dismantled throughout the length and breadth of the world. Democratic governments, especially in Europe, must strongly condemn this and all other heinous terrorist acts of the regime. And this should not be limited simply to words, but the regime should face the consequences of their heinous deeds. As Mrs. Rajavi has continuously said, any embassy of the regime in Europe used for such evil purposes should immediately be closed and its diplomats expelled once and for all. All the terrorist networks of the regime must be discovered, and the agents of the regime must be tried, and they must be punished. Their refugee status and their citizenship must be revoked immediately. The regime's Ministry of Intelligence and the Revolutionary Guards in their entirety must be included in the terrorist list of European countries. Surely, this should only be the beginning of walking towards the day when the villain leaders of the regime are brought to justice for their horrible crimes against humanity. Thank you.
When a Middle Eastern country orders one of its diplomats to bomb an opposition rally in Europe, prepares the lethal device, sends him to the EU on a commercial airliner with the bomb in his diplomatic bag, what should the West do? This is not some sort of Hollywood fantasy. This is reality. This really happened. Now, we've just heard the sentence passed by a Belgian court on Asdallah Assadi, the Iranian diplomat, and his 4 Iranian co-conspirators who were involved in the plot to kill and maim hundreds at a mass rally of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, the NCRI, attended by tens of thousands of people at Villepinte near Paris in June 2018. I was there. Now, all 4 have received long jail terms for terrorism. I was a plaintiff at the trial, along with many other supporters of the PMI-MEK. Today's court ruling is a great victory for the NCRI and its charismatic leader, the President-elect Mrs. Maryam Rajavi. is also a great victory for the PMOI-MEK and their frontline team in Ashraf 3. The court's verdict will be of enormous significance and a huge morale booster for the courageous resistance units throughout Iran, who can now see their tyrannical mullahs regime exposed and held to account in a European Court of Justice. The clerical regime has a history of deploying its assassins in the guise of diplomats and using their embassies around the world as bomb factories. Since seizing power in the 1979 revolution, the theocratic regime, whose main contribution to the world has been Islamic fundamentalism, has ruthlessly bombed and shot its opponents round the globe, while torturing and executing political prisoners at home. But this is the first time a diplomat has been caught red-handed and jailed for acts of terror. It must surely mark a turning point in relations with the mullahs regime. There can be no return to business as usual. There can be no more arguments that diplomacy is the answer. The arch criminal and supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, together with his senior ministers like President Hassan Rouhani, Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, and the Minister of Intelligence Mahmoud Alavi, ordered the spying, ordered the bomb plots, and ordered the assassinations. They must be held to account. It's time for a complete change of direction in US, EU, and UN policy towards Iran. The people of Iran expect the West to be on their side. They expect their calls for democracy to be taken seriously. Human rights and women's rights cannot be compromised or marginalized on the pretext of political considerations or trade deals, or particularly the flawed nuclear deal. The appeasement policy, lamely followed by the EU and its top diplomat Joseph Borrell, is dead in the water. It's high time the West realized that the peace they have bought with appeasement is only temporary, and the price they have paid has been freedom and democracy for the people of Iran. Now, following the Antwerp trial, the EU will have to reassess completely its relationship with the criminal mullahs regime. The verdict in Antwerp today proves what we have known all along. The Iranian people are being governed by gangsters who will not hesitate to assassinate, bomb, maim, torture, and kill their opponents at home and abroad. The only way to restore peace, justice, democracy, and freedom to the people of Iran, and to the Middle East, and to the world, is to remove them from power and indict them for crimes against humanity in the international courts of justice. It's for this objective that I support the main opposition movement, the PMOI-MEK, and their brave supporters in Ashraf 3 and across the whole of Iran. Today's victory is only the start. The mullahs are finished.